15 years ago, I realized that there was a tremendous amount of misperceptions about polygamists. That people thought that it was a cult that was repressive and domineering. And it's really about being a family, and we felt that it was important for the public to understand that. And as a matter of fact, our premise was that if people knew that this was not something that they needed to fear or destroy, then they would just go away and leave us alone.
On the investigative edge tonight, is polygamy a cover for cult activity? The man who brought the controversial lifestyle to America's attention, polygamist Tom Green, has 30 kids and is charged with child rape for allegedly having sex with one of his 5 wives when she was just 13 years old. Joining us now from Salt Lake City is John Llewellyn, a former polygamist who knows Tom Green personally. John is also the author of A Teenager's Tears, When Parents Convert to Polygamy. Also from Utah tonight is the attorney who successfully prosecuted Tom Green, David Levitt. And here in the studio with me is Suzan Mazur, a journalist covering the Green case for the Financial Times. Good to see all of you. Mr. Llewellyn, how were you seduced by polygamy?
Well, I was first introduced to it as a deputy sheriff. I was a sergeant in charge of all the sex crimes in Salt Lake County. And for some reason, they made polygamy a sex crime. I knew nothing about it. I wasn't even active in the LDS Church. And so, being a good detective, I researched it, and as a result, I became active in the Mormon Church, and as circumstances turned out, I became a polygamist.
All right. At one point, you had 3 wives, correct?
That's correct.
At the same time?
Yes.
Why did you get out? Why did you give up that lifestyle?
I didn't violate my covenants with these women. As it turned out, I no longer wanted anything to do with the polygamist groups. They were clear full of corruption. I became the lead investigator in a lawsuit involving the Allred group. And as it turns out, a lot of the women are married to the priesthood rather than to the man. And so when I no longer wanted anything to do with it, they left me, or the one did. And then the other one went back to the church.
Is there anything you miss about that lifestyle, sir?
Nothing at all. But
Mr. Levitt, I think Mr. Llewellyn raises a good point. Do you see, bigamy, of course, is against the law in your state. Do you see polygamy and bigamy as a failure of law enforcement?
I think what we've seen in the Tom Green case is an institutional lack of understanding with the harms that occur inside of polygamist relationships. I think that those harms are simply coming to light now.
All right, and Suzan, you see these as human rights violations, particularly when it comes to women.
Yes, no.
Don't these women knowingly enter these relationships?
No.
Or do you think they're being forced into it?
They're brainwashed. They have no real outside information. They're brought up within the church, and when they become of age, they're married.
Do they feel pressure to buy into this lifestyle, or they really think they have no choice?
They're hostages. They have no alternatives. They're trapped in this situation. And the numbers are 50 to 100,000 in North America.
Which is staggering.
These are concentration camps, literally. Because law enforcement has failed from the bottom to the top on this issue, I think the United Nations should look further into doing something. We're living in a third world country, in a sense, when you think about Utah, Idaho, Arizona, Montana, and so on. Mr.
Llewellyn, I want your thoughts on that. As you reflect back on your marriages, you were married to 3 women at the same time. Do you view those women today as being held hostage by you or by the church?
No. We have 4 major polygamous organizations in Utah and in the surrounding states. 2 of them are closed societies, the Colorado City and the Kingstons. It would be valid to say that those women are psychological hostages. But in the Allred group, in which I was associated with, they have more free agency. And where the closed societies get their new converts from their offspring, in the Allred group and also the TLC, the Church of Jim Harmston's group in Manti, Utah, most of their converts come from outside, the frustrated Mormons who have a grievance, and these people add to that grievance and seduce them into their groups.
Mr. Levitt, how much cult activity do you think is going on in any of these sectors Mr. Llewellyn just mentioned? Do you have evidence of that?
You know, Paula, it would be hard for me to describe one as a cult and one as not as a cult. What I see are groups of people who prey upon young girls, who take advantage of their innocence, who marry them, who bear children with them, and then who basically take away any opportunity that they have to be productive members of society.
Are you accusing prosecutors like David Levitt of going too soft on these men who are bringing these women into this lifestyle,
Well,
Susan?
I think David Levitt has been a prince among men in dealing with the Tom Green situation in such a painstaking way. However, I think that there are so many laws on the books against polygamy at this point. There are 2 federal laws, the Supreme Court ruling. There is the Mann Act that has to do with interstate trafficking of women. Every day, constantly, on the Utah-Arizona border, there is trafficking of women, of plural wives. This has been taken up by the Supreme Court in 1946, and the people who were convicted, Jessups and Stubbs, that conviction was upheld by the Supreme Court by Justice Douglas. So this is going on every day in America.
Well, Mr. Llewellyn, I guess what's striking to me is you initially set out to investigate these followers of polygamy, and yet you were vulnerable to it. And as you look back, why do you think you joined the movement?
Well, in being perfectly honest, when you have 2 or 3 lovely women who want to be your wife at the same time, it's easy to accept this doctrine. If you want to become a polygamist, there's plenty of doctrine out there to justify it. But there's also plenty of other evidence that I've uncovered, historical evidence especially, that indicates that the doctrine of plural wives was nothing more than an invention. What Susan said about Colorado City is absolutely true. What is happening in these cults is that women are being merchandised. They have to pay their tithing, they have to grovel at the feet of the prophet in order to get a plural wife. It's big business. It's a multi-million-dollar business.
All right, you 3, we're going to have to leave it there this evening. What a fascinating discussion. We'd like to continue to follow this with our trio here tonight. Thank you, David Levitt, John Llewellyn, and Suzan Mazur for your perspectives. Coming up next, ex-conservative David Brock now says his explosive 1993 book on Anita Hill was all a lie. Is he getting back at his former allies? Barbara Olson, whose husband Ted Olson was dragged through the mud by Brock earlier this year, joins with some reaction next. Keep it right here on The Edge.